The restaurant smelled like sugar and burned espresso, the kind of place that tries to soften cruelty with dessert. Candlelight flickered against polished silverware, throwing warm reflections that didn't match the chill settling in my chest. Plates were mostly cleared when the waiter arrived with sweets. Forks laid carefully, smiles practiced. Everyone relaxed too quickly, like the hard parts of the evening were already behind us. They weren't. My name is Hannah Miller. I'm 33 years old. My sister leaned back in her chair, spoon tapping lightly against porcelain. She smirked the way she always did when she felt untouchable, eyes sliding past me and landing on my son. Maybe if your son had two parents, she said casually, he wouldn't be such a mess. The word didn't finish itself, but it didn't need to. It hung there heavy and deliberate. My son's shoulders tightened. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. He slowly pushed his plate away, the metal scraping softly against the tablecloth. That sound, small, embarrassed, cut deeper than the insult itself. I've always been the one who swallows it. The one who smiles through comments meant to bruise. The one who explains things away later in the car with gentle words meant to clean up adult messes. Swallowing had felt like protection once. Like strength. I felt my hand move before my thoughts caught up. I reached into my bag and touched the edge of the folder inside. Cardstock. Heavy. Familiar. I'd carried it for months without intending to open it here in public over dessert. But intention has limits when something breaks. My father cleared his throat. Let it go, he muttered, eyes fixed on his coffee cup. Let it go. Like I always did. A memory drifted in without warning. My son at 6 asking why Auntie didn't come to his school play. Me telling him she was busy. Another memory layered on top. My sister rolling her eyes at a birthday party, whispering something that made her husband laugh while my son stood close to me pretending not to hear. I had swallowed it then. I had swallowed it every time. The restaurant buzzed quietly around us. Laughter from another table. The hiss of the espresso machine. Someone clinking ice in a glass. Ordinary sounds continuing, unaware of the line that had just been crossed. I looked at my son. At the way he folded his hands in his lap like he was trying to make himself smaller. At the way children learn when they are being discussed instead of defended. I've always been the one who swallows it. But swallowing teaches people what they can get away with. My sister lifted her spoon again, satisfied, already moving on. I'm just saying, she added lightly. Kids need stability. Something in me settled then, not anger exactly. Resolution. The kind that arrives when you realize silence has cost more than speaking ever could. I placed the folder on the table, not opening it yet. Just letting it exist between us. My sister noticed immediately. Her smile faltered just slightly. What's that? She asked. Nothing, my father said quickly. Hannah, don't. I met his eyes. I've let things go for a long time, I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. Long enough. My sister laughed once, sharp. You're being dramatic. Maybe. Or maybe I was finally being precise. I slid my chair back just enough to breathe. The folder stayed where it was, heavy with things unsaid. I could feel every moment I'd kept quiet pressing against my ribs, asking for release. I thought about the night my son asked why his dad didn't come around anymore. About the careful answers I'd crafted to protect him from adult failures. About how protection turns into complicity if it only works one way. I've always been the one who swallows it. And swallowing had started to poison us both. The waiter returned, hovering uncertainly with a tray of Czech presenters. He sensed it, the way strangers sometimes do when a room turns brittle. My sister shifted in her seat, suddenly alert. Pale crept up her neck, draining the confidence from her face. Dad, she said, forcing a laugh, tell her to relax. He didn't answer. He just stared at the folder. I rested my palm on it, feeling the smooth edge beneath my fingers. I hadn't planned to open it tonight. I hadn't planned any of this. But plans change when someone you love is made smaller at the table. And for the first time, swallowing felt like the greater risk. The silence stretched longer than it should have. My sister watched my hand resting on the folder like it might bite. Her confidence didn't vanish all at once. It thinned, pulled back into calculation. She'd never liked uncertainty. She thrived on reactions she could manage, emotions she could redirect. This was different. Hannah, my father said again, quieter now. This isn't the place. I nodded once. You're right, I said. It isn't. But it's the moment. My son stayed still, eyes fixed on the table like movement might make things worse. I recognized that posture. I'd worn it myself for years. I've always been the one who swallows it. Swallowing teaches children when to disappear. My sister scoffed, leaning back. You're really doing this? Over a joke. I looked at her. Jokes make people laugh. She rolled her eyes. You're too sensitive. He needs to toughen up. That was it. Not the insult. Not even the cruelty. It was the certainty. The way she said it, like she was helping. Like humiliation was a public service. I opened the folder. Paper slid softly against paper, the sound almost polite. Inside were copies, neatly arranged, tabbed, unarguable. School reports. Therapy summaries. Messages I'd saved instead of deleting. A timeline I'd assembled late at night while my son slept, when I finally allowed myself to admit patterns mattered. My sister leaned forward despite herself. Her color drained another shade. What is that? She asked again, this time without humor. It's context, I said. My father stood abruptly, chair scraping. Enough. I didn't raise my voice. You've asked me for patience my entire life, I said, still seated. I've given it. This is what it cost. I slid one page across the table, not to her but toward my father. He didn't touch it at first. When he did, his hands trembled just enough to notice. His eyes moved quickly, then slower. His mouth tightened. My sister laughed, brittle and sharp. You're bringing paperwork to dinner now? Yes, I said. Because words haven't been enough. I've always been the one who swallows it. But swallowing doesn't stop damage. It just hides it. I turned another page. You said my son was a mess, I said calmly. These are the notes from the counselor he sees. The one he started seeing after family gatherings. My sister froze. What counselor? She snapped. The one he needed, I replied. After comments like yours. The restaurant felt suddenly too quiet. Even nearby conversations seemed to lower, as if the room sensed something irreversible had begun. My father rubbed his forehead. Hannah, he said, strained, why didn't you tell us it was this bad? I met his gaze. I did. Just not loudly. My mother hadn't spoken at all. She stared at the table, lips pressed together, eyes fixed on the candle like it might absolve her if she waited long enough. My sister pushed back from the table. This is manipulation, she said. You're trying to make me the villain. No, I said. I'm refusing to make him one. I nodded toward my son. He finally looked up then. Our eyes met. There was fear there, but also something else. Relief. Like someone had finally named the thing pressing on his chest. I closed the folder and pulled it back toward me. I wasn't here to litigate every detail. I was here to end a pattern. I won't let anyone talk about my child like he's broken because his father left, I said evenly. Especially not in front of him. My sister opened her mouth. Closed it. Her hands shook as she reached for her glass and missed. Dad muttered again, let it go. I stood this time, slow and deliberate. I did, I said. For years. I've always been the one who swallows it. And tonight I finally stopped. I placed a hand on my son's shoulder. We're leaving, I said. He didn't hesitate. He stood immediately, chair legs scraping with a confidence I hadn't seen from him in weeks. That sound, steady, decided, was the loudest thing in the room. As we walked away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Some truths don't require witnesses. They require boundaries. And once spoken, they don't go back into the folder. We didn't go straight home. That surprised my son. He followed me out of the restaurant quietly, his hand brushing mine once like he needed to confirm I was real. The night air hit us both at once, cool, sharp, carrying the smell of rain and car exhaust. Streetlights hummed overhead, casting long shadows that stretched and broke as we walked. I've always been the one who swallows it. But swallowing had kept us trapped inside rooms where we didn't belong. Are you mad? He asked softly as we reached the sidewalk. No, I said. I'm done. He nodded, absorbing that distinction like it mattered. It did. We sat in the car for a moment before I turned the key. I watched his reflection in the rearview mirror. The way his jaw was tight, the way his eyes kept flicking toward the restaurant windows like he expected someone to chase us out with apologies or accusations. Neither came. I'm sorry, he said suddenly. I turned fully in my seat. For what? For making things awkward, he whispered. That word landed harder than anything my sister had said. I've always been the one who swallows it. And swallowing teaches children to apologize for existing. I reached back and took his hands. They were cold. You didn't make anything awkward, I said. You told the truth with your body. That's allowed. He blinked fast. She said I'm a mess. I shook my head. You're hurt. There's a difference. The drive home was quiet but not heavy. The radio murmured low. Tires hissed over damp pavement. Familiar streets passed without commentary. When we pulled into the driveway, my phone buzzed again, this time a message from my father. You embarrassed the family. I stared at it, then locked the screen without replying. Inside, the house greeted us gently. The porch light glowed steady. The smell of laundry soap lingered from earlier that day. Ordinary safe things. My son kicked off his shoes and headed for his room without being told, like his body already knew what it needed. I stood in the kitchen and finally let myself breathe fully. A memory surfaced. Me at 12, sitting at a different table while my sister mocked my haircut and everyone laughed it off as teasing. My father telling me later not to be so sensitive. My mother saying nothing. I'd swallowed it then too. I'd learned that discomfort was a personal failing. That lesson stopped with me. My sister called 20 minutes later. I didn't answer. Then my mother. Then my father again. The phone lit up and went dark, until I turned it face down on the counter. I've always been the one who swallows it. Tonight, silence wasn't swallowing. It was choosing. Later, my son came back into the kitchen in pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Are they mad at you? He asked. Probably, I said honestly. He frowned. Is that bad? I considered the question. No, I said finally. Not if being liked costs us peace. He thought about that, then nodded once like he was filing it away for later use. When he went to bed, I sat on the edge of the couch and felt the aftershock roll through me. Not fear. Not regret. Something closer to grief. The grief of realizing how long I'd let this go on. How many dinners I'd smiled through. How many car rides I'd spent explaining away cruelty instead of naming it. I checked my phone once more before turning it off. One new message, this time from my sister. You think you're better than us now? I didn't reply. Better wasn't the word. Clear was. I've always been the one who swallows it. And clarity feels strange when you've lived on restraint. That night, lying in bed, I listened to the house settle around us. Pipes clicking. The wind nudging the windows. My son's quiet footsteps as he moved in his room, unafraid to exist loudly in his own home. Whatever fallout came next, I knew one thing with certainty. I hadn't ruined dinner. I'd ended a pattern. And patterns don't break quietly, but they do break. Especially when someone finally stops swallowing. Morning came gently, like it didn't want to argue with what had happened the night before. Pale light slipped through the curtains, settling on the floor in soft rectangles. The house smelled like toast and last night's rain drifting in through a cracked window. Ordinary things. Steady things. My son came into the kitchen quietly, still half asleep, hair sticking up in uneven directions. He poured cereal without asking and sat at the table like he belonged there, because he did. He glanced at me once, cautious. Are we still okay? He asked. I set my mug down and met his eyes. We're better than okay. He nodded, accepting that answer without needing it dressed up. I've always been the one who swallows it. But swallowing never made us safe. It just made us smaller. My phone stayed silent that morning. No apologies. No clarifications. No dramatic reversals. Just quiet. And for the first time, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. Earned, intentional. Later that afternoon, my father called again. I answered this time not because I owed him but because I was ready. You didn't have to humiliate her, he said, skipping any pretense of concern for me. I didn't humiliate anyone, I replied calmly. I stopped allowing my son to be humiliated. He sighed long and heavy. Families don't keep records like that. Families don't keep score on children, I said. Yet here we are. Silence stretched. I could hear him breathing, recalibrating. You could have handled it privately. I tried, I said. For years. He didn't argue after that. He just said quieter, your sister's been crying. I closed my eyes. So has my son, I said. Just not in front of everyone. That ended the call. I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned. There's a difference. That evening, my sister sent a message. Not an apology, not quite an attack either. You didn't have to go that far. I read it once and didn't respond. Far is a relative term when someone has been pushed back their entire life. I've always been the one who swallows it. And people get uncomfortable when you stop absorbing their excess. Days passed. Then a week. Family gatherings were mentioned without invitations attached. Group chats went quiet. The absence was noticeable, but it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. One night while I was folding laundry, my son wandered in and leaned against the doorway. "Auntie's not coming over anymore, is she?" he asked. "No," I said gently. He considered that, then shrugged. "That's okay." The simplicity of it nearly undid me. I realized then that I'd been carrying guilt that didn't belong to me. Guilt for protecting him. Guilt for setting boundaries. Guilt for choosing discomfort now instead of damage later. That guilt finally loosened its grip. If you've ever been the one who keeps the peace at your own expense, you know how strange it feels when you stop. Some families don't miss you when you leave. They miss the version of you who stayed quiet. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't demand understanding. I chose my child. I chose not to teach him that cruelty deserves accommodation. I chose not to model silence as strength. I chose not to keep swallowing something that was making us both sick. That night, after my son went to bed, I turned off the lights and stood in the quiet hallway for a moment. The house felt settled. Whole. Ours. I've always been the one who swallows it. But tonight I let it go. Not the anger. Not the truth. Just the need to keep absorbing what should never have been served. Silence ends when you speak.